So again, welcome to today's virtual workshop. This is with the People's Resource Center. We've been around since 1975. And as I mentioned, every service that we provide is no charge to clients who live in DuPage County. People's Resource Center, we're predominantly known as a food pantry. We have a food pantry in Wheaton and Westmont. We also do food pantry at our West Chicago location partners on Saturdays and Tuesdays. We do adult learning and literacy. So if anybody is studying ESL, wants to study for a citizenship exam or get their GED, we have services for that. We have a free art studio. We offer everything from watercolors to clay work. We have a clothing closet at our Westmont location. We offer free clothes, both clothes for job interviews and just casual wear. We have computer training and access. So if anyone needs help with Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, needs some basic computer training or needs a laptop, we offer those services. We also offer rental assistance, utility assistance, and car repair. And of course, we offer job search assistance, which is part of what this program is today. If you have any questions about job search assistance, you're welcome to call our main line, which is 630-682-5402, extension 333. And as mentioned, we do job coaching, we do workshops, we have assessments, we do mock interviews. We also have a regularly updated job board that anybody can access online through our website. So resumes versus robots, or how to get your resume past applicant tracking systems into the hands of hiring managers. So the internet has kind of fundamentally changed how we hire, right? It's in some ways it's a lot easier and versus you can do kind of one clicks through LinkedIn or Indeed. But it's also a lot harder because there's more people applying for the same positions. So the average corporate job posting receives over 250 applicants. And there's a need to figure out how to navigate all of that. And so they can get kind of inundated with information, and applicant tracking systems are created to make that easier for hiring managers to figure out who they want to connect with and who they want to hire. As I mentioned, hiring managers are very overwhelmed with the volume of resumes that pour in. Studies suggest, I just read this in the Wall Street Journal, that on average, a hiring manager looks at a resume for about 6 seconds. Whether that's actually true or not, the implication is that it's pretty brief, the amount of time that a manager is looking at a resume. Roughly 75% of the people that apply for positions aren't qualified for the job. So that's often people that are doing kind of easy one clicks through Indeed, just kind of mass applying for things. A lot of those people that are applying for positions aren't necessarily qualified. And so it can feel like a black hole, right? Where you're applying for things and you don't hear back. You don't know if anybody actually saw your resume. You never hear back, or you hear that you immediately hear you weren't qualified or that they went with a different candidate. And so as they kind of rely on technology, they kind of winnow out less qualified candidates. So based on a variety of factors, many resumes are tossed before a human being actually sees them. So you could be applying for positions that a human being never actually gets to look at your resume. One second, I'm having my computer is paused. Here we go. Did I go too far? So I think I did. I apologize. It's being a little slow. Okay, there we are. See if I can get to slide 8. No, it doesn't like slide 8. So we're just going to go to slide 9. So how can you kind of beat the bots, right? So I think there's this big fear that when you are submitting your resume online, that there's really nothing that you can do in terms of like how you navigate those systems. And that's just not true, right? You just have to kind of know the skills or know how those systems are looking at your resume in order to navigate those systems really well. So part of how you beat the bots is to create a resume that is quote unquote ATS safe. So that has to do with how is your resume formatted? What are your headings? What are your fonts? And what does your resume say, right? Do the keywords in your resume match the keywords on a job description? So a good example is we had a client who was applying for a customer service position, but in the position they were applying for, the job description and the company referred to their customers as guests. So they referred to that as guest services. The client put in their resume customer service, and they never kind of got through, right? So us as human beings know customer service and guest services are the same thing. Robots are pretty literal, and we'll see that doesn't match and it doesn't go through. So she redid her resume to say guest services in all the parts where she had said customer service. And she got her resume through and she ended up getting the position that she wanted. And it really is kind of that straightforward in a lot of ways in which you have to be kind of literal, right? In terms of what you're putting on your resume, because that's how the robot or the system has been designed and set up to navigate and kind of sort out resumes, right? They don't have the subjective thinking skills to know when you say Microsoft Office Suite that you're including Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, and all of those things. It's literally looking word for word. So kind of resume do's and don'ts, which is, it seems really straightforward, but have a lot of white space on your resume. Include accomplishment statements. So this is kind of a really big one, and I'm going to talk about this again later, but accomplishments are not the same things as duties. So a duty is I answered the phone. An accomplishment is I answered the phone within three rings 99% of the time. So a goal of an accomplishment is to say how well you did your duty. And that's what hiring managers are looking for. They know kind of what you did. They want to know how well did you do it. Use keywords on your resume that match keywords on the job description. So like I mentioned with customer service versus guest services, if they use a specific phrase in their job description, use that same phrase, even if that's not how your job was labeled. If it kind of means or implies the same thing, use the same phrasing in order to help you kind of move forward. Be really cognizant of your fonts. So use sans serif fonts. Use correct format for dates, which we'll get to. And use clear and concise information for education and training. So you and so that seems really straightforward, but there's all good things to keep in mind. General don'ts, don't use colored paper. You could use it if you go in person. So if you go into a job fair, if you want to bring your resume in with you, you can make a really beautiful resume that you can bring in and hand to the person that interviewing you or a hiring manager. But robots can't read beautiful graphics and colors and things like that. So you want to make it really simple. So you can have a really simplified version of your resume that you submit online, and a more kind of colorful or graphically designed resume that you bring with you. Don't use graphics, fancy borders, designs, or pictures. They can't necessarily read that, especially the older applicant tracking systems. Don't have long paragraphs of information. Don't provide only job titles and dates. And don't kind of use vague objective statements. You want to be, as I mentioned before, like concise, but also specific in what it is that you want. And I didn't mention this earlier, but there's more than one applicant tracking system. So there's hundreds, if not thousands of them. Some people use applicant tracking systems that are used by multiple organizations. A lot of organizations have their own applicant tracking systems. So be aware that when we're talking about robots or applicant tracking systems, there's not just one system that you're navigating. It's every kind of system that an organization, particularly larger organizations, will use to kind of help navigate their hiring process. So as mentioned, keep formatting simple. So you kind of want to use, there's like 3 main resume formats, which is chronological by date. So, and you kind of want to stick within like the last 10 years of employment. You can also do a functional resume. So if you've been working for a really long time, if you feel like your resume could be 4 to 6 pages, you could turn it into kind of a functional resume, which focuses on skills and accomplishments. You want to use bullet points where appropriate. Don't put anything in your headers or your footers that should be left empty. Like applicant tracking systems can't necessarily read that space. You want to focus on your last 10 years of employment. And focus on, don't, avoid older irrelevant details. Don't use outdated terminology. If you're really adept at Microsoft in 1995, employers, they don't want to know that. They want to know, do you know what needs to be known now? You could transform some of that information and say, lifelong learner, interested in always learning new technology. But employers really aren't interested in information that's more than 10 to 15 years old on your resume. If you've been kind of working at similar places, or you've been working, let's say you worked 30 years and you only worked at 2 places, maybe a functional resume might be better for you. Omit lines, logos, pictures, symbols, and shadings. So I had this question a couple of weeks ago. Somebody said, well, should I put my photo on my resume? No. Don't put your photo on your resume. You also don't need to put your address on your resume. And that's for safety reasons, right? This information is kind of floating out in the internet. You don't need to put that information on your resume. So use kind of standard headings. So when you're looking at your resume, it should all kind of look uniform, right? There shouldn't be one set of headings up top, one set of headings at the bottom. You should kind of decide on the format styling of your resume and just be consistent throughout. You could do a summary. There's mixed feelings about whether you should or you shouldn't. I think that's up to you and how you want to communicate kind of where you are. You want to do work experience, kind of volunteer or military experience, education. And always keep in the back of your mind that like your resume is a marketing tool. So what is it that you want employers to know about you? On here it says avoid using a career objective. It's outdated. Summaries are kind of the same thing. It just depends. So it depends on how you feel about what you're applying for, kind of what's the history of that organization. Different organizations look for different things. Unfortunately, the hiring process can be subjective. So use qualifications or skills and kind of use kind of friendly keywords, ATS friendly keywords instead. So think about, like I said, look at the job description and think about what are the keywords in that job description and make sure that they are in your resume. And you no longer have to put kind of references upon request at the bottom of your resume. Most employers know that if they want references, they can ask you for them. All right, so I learned this and I didn't realize this is probably for me why I wasn't hearing back in applying with my resume. Your font can be part of what what makes your resume not move forward. So sans serif fonts are called like fonts without tails. They're modern and clean. So contemporary fonts that are like that are kind of the Arial font, Calibri, Helvetica, and Verdana. Fonts that have tails often can't be read by older applicant tracking systems. So it could be when you submit your resume, if your resume has got like a fun font on it that isn't sans serif, it might just show up to the applicant tracking system as like a Wingedings version. So that could be part of it, in which you could submit a resume and be highly qualified, but depending on the font you're using, the system might not be able to read the information you've submitted. So part of how you can also do headings, if you've been doing them with like underlining or lines, or with different fonts, is you can simply just do kind of a bold or an increase in your font to indicate a heading. So you could do kind of 10 to 12 point fonts for your body of your resume, including headings, and then you can do kind of 16 or 18 point fonts for your name on the top. So you can kind of visually differentiate by changing kind of the size of your font and whether or not your font is bolded. And so this is a big one. You want to standardize the dates of employment. So a correct way to format would be a 2-digit month and a 4-digit year. Or you don't want to do, so as you can see below, it says, there's a 1-digit month, 4-digit year, or you've got February 2012 to September 2016. Really the best way to do that, and the way that most applicant tracking systems are going to read dates, is 2-digit month, 4-digit year. You also don't want to do, and I know this can be kind of challenging, is that if you've had seasonal work, let's say you worked somewhere for a while, and you seasonally worked somewhere, you don't want to put seasonal next to that date. They're not necessarily going to be able to read that. So you want to think in terms of 2-digit month, 4-digit years, or you could do to present or current, in terms of if you're still working there. As mentioned, and I keep mentioning this because it's really important, is to match your resume keywords exactly. So you can use kind of both the acronym and the spelled out form. So for example, if you say, oh, I'm a CPA, you could put certified public accountant. And there's different, I think we'll get into this, there's different things that you can use, tools that you can use online that are free, that can help you compare your resume to the job description to see how closely they match. And the goal is to kind of aim for repeating important keywords 2 to 3 times. So if you see customer service or diversity or I'm trying to think, but if you see terms that come up repeatedly in a job description, realize that that's what's important to the employer, and those words should also appear multiple times throughout your resume. So an example of like administrative assistant keywords could be, so like if they say customer service a lot, you'd want to mention customer service. You could have administrative skills, and you can Google a lot of this. So if you're not sure, if you're applying for a position and you're not sure kind of what are the keywords or skills that a position is looking for, you can Google it if you're not 100% sure. You can also kind of, especially if you look and see, hey, my resume doesn't really match this job description. You can also kind of Google what are keywords, what are words that an employer is looking for in terms of kind of skills that they're trying to find in a future employee. So use active words. People also call them power words. You can Google a list of kind of active words or power words, and you can use them to describe your accomplishments. So as I mentioned before, accomplishments are how well you did something, not just what you did. So there's an example here of achieved 25% increase in quarterly sales. You do want to be aware that when you're when you're writing out your resume, you don't necessarily want 4 bullet points that say managed, 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 right? You want to think of synonyms or other ways to phrase something so that you have a variety of active verbs within your resume. Now, I know that sometimes maybe you can't think about, a 25% increase in quarterly sales, but you could think about did you consistently get positive feedback for something? Did you manage 25 people? It's hard for us to sometimes think of what we do in quantifiable terms. But that is often what they want to see on a resume so that they can kind of visualize and picture you bringing that same level of value into their workplace. So if you can sit down and think about, okay, well, how many people did I manage? How many people did I interact with on a shift? And you can kind of guesstimate. You could, if you interacted with 20 people on a shift, you could say interacted with 20 plus people, right? You don't have to be really, really accurate. You do want to give them a sense of what it is that you did throughout your role. So as I mentioned, metrics, right? So that's what we've been talking about in terms of metrics. And if you have a hard time thinking about what you've done in terms of metrics, right? You're like, I just do my job. Talk about it with somebody else that doesn't really know what you've done. And ask them to ask you kind of questions of, well, how would you quantify that? Or if you had to say how many people you worked with, or if you ever got, I don't know, employee appreciation or recognition, things like that. Talk about it with someone else, because sometimes other people can see things about what we do that we don't necessarily see ourselves. And again, not to feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but you want to avoid stating job duties. So that's what's in a job description. So if you think of job duties as what's listed in a job description, you want to think about that and then think about how would I talk about how well I did these things on my resume. And this seems really straightforward, but spell check. Reread. If you're not sure, have somebody else that you trust look at your resume and read through. Is there spelling errors? Did you switch formatting in the middle? You kind of want to proofread your resume forwards and backwards because you don't want a spelling error to be the reason that your resume doesn't necessarily move forward.
Okay. I'm going to take over. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so jumping off from what Nicole said, what we want to make sure, one of the things we want you to make sure to get out of this today is what is the best resume format. And I find when I work with clients, this can be one of the most confusing things. Should I send a Word formatted resume? Should I make it a PDF resume? So here are some best practices for that. First, if you are using the ATS or the applicant tracking system, which like Nicole said, it could be something like Taleo or Brass Ring. And you can see that when you're applying through a company's website, it'll actually say like Taleo or Brass Ring. You can tell you're using some sort of software system. The best thing you can do when you are putting in your information and resume into that ATS is to make sure your resume is in a text-based format. And text-based just means that it's the same information, but it's not using any sort of advanced formatting like lines, between your contact information and your summary statement, or, or even bullet points, or so you can make your resume just text based. And if that's something, you want to work with a job coach on, you could do that too. So when you're also applying through a company's website, they also may ask for you to upload a PDF format. or upload I guess mostly a PDF format. So if that's what the system is telling you to do, you can you should definitely upload a PDF format. Again, the goal of this is to make sure that your resume is getting through what we're calling the robots, so that you're not applying and then your resume is getting sort of stuck in this system and not seen by a hiring manager. So the best way to overcome that is to, follow their instructions, but also make sure you're uploading what they want. And whether that's a text-based resume or a PDF resume, those are the most important things. And, as we put at the bottom here too, if you're emailing, the best format, if you're emailing someone your resume, the best format actually is PDF, so that they're seeing your resume as you see it. So, yeah. So we wanted to give you an example of what resume will get through an applicant tracking system. So this resume actually would not get through an applicant tracking system very well. It would be a resume that looked a little jumbled in terms of information because, for instance, it uses lines, like that line between objective and those statements, as well as, the line under summary. Those types of things, the applicant tracking system has trouble reading and formatting, and it prevents your information from being clearly seen by the hiring manager that's using the applicant tracking system. So we also wanted to give you an example of a resume that would get through an applicant tracking system and be seen in a clear manner by a hiring manager. So what we've taken off this resume, you can see, are those lines between, say, like the summary, and also between work experience, as well as this is best formatted in terms of the dates. You can see 01-2010 to present. So this is a resume that when the hiring manager is looking at it in the applicant tracking system, they're going to clearly see all this information. So we're also talking about how important it is to use keywords. So we just want to give you a sample job description. This one is from College of DuPage, and then show you how you can use the job description when you're submitting your resume to pick out, for instance, keywords. And like Nicole had said before, make sure that the applicant tracking system sort of flags or make sure that the hiring manager sees you. Nicole gave a great description before about how guest services versus customer service, those are really the same things. So it's important to read the job description for the terms that they're using, and then make sure you are putting those similar terms in your job description or your resume that you submit. So there's great tools for this. One of the first ones you can use to identify those keywords is TagCrowd. You can go to tagcrowd.com and you can upload the job description and hit visualize, and it actually gives you in sort of weighted order the importance of the keywords. So this is an example of what you would see. So we put the College of DuPage job description into TagCloud, and this is what TagCloud came back and said: out of this job description, these are the most important or repeated words in the job description. So when you look at this and TagCrowd, if you're applying for that position at College of DuPage, for example, you would want to make sure that your resume that you're submitting for that position is strong in these words, so that you're using the word administrative, that you've done those types of duties, or that you have worked with students or worked with resumes. So, I sometimes explain it to clients as, if you're applying for a certain position and you're looking at the job description, you want to make sure your resume is matching up to that job description. So a hiring manager, when they're looking at your resume, can say, oh, here's what we need. Here's what we need, like records or registrations or data. This is our job description. And then here's a great resume that shows that's the person's experience and background. So TagCloud can help you do that. Same thing for the COG job description here. Tag crowd, by putting in that job description, can help you sort of single out those most important words. So sorry, sort of like the same slide. And then we use tag crowd to also compare the resume. Example, Mary Smith's resume that would be submitted for this COG job description. And you can see sort of side by side where some of the things are lining up, like records, a registration student, but then some of them aren't. So you'd want to really look, if this was Mary Smith, she'd want to really look at her resume and say, you know, the job description is heavily weighted in these words. I'm seeing some of those words in my resume, but I may need to modify my resume a bit to really line it up with the job description, so I'm getting through the applicant tracking system and the hiring manager is seeing my resume. So besides Tag Crowd, there are several tools that you can use. One of my favorites is JobScan. If you go to their website, what you can do is upload the job description on one side of JobScan, and then your resume also in JobScan, and JobScan compares how well your resume is matching the job description in a percentage. So you could go on there and upload the job and upload your resume, and if it says, you know, 40% match, then you know you have a little bit of work to do to make sure your resume matches the job description, because in an applicant tracking system, if you submit a resume that's just about 40%, that's probably not going to get through to the hiring manager. The applicant tracking system, because it's a robot, is going to say, this person really doesn't fit, so I'm not sure I'm going to let or flag it for the hiring manager. And, you know, we know that you're qualified. If you're applying for it, you're qualified. So we want to make sure that you're getting through and making sure whether it's your keywords or your formatting gets through to that hiring manager. So those are some tools you can use.
And Sarah, I just want to mention really quickly, because I've seen a couple articles about this, and while we're talking about kind of matching keywords, and if you Google this, you'll find this. It's called white lining, where people put in their keywords that they think are going to match, but they put them in a white font so it doesn't show up on their resume, but it'll show up when the applicant tracking system reads that resume. Don't do this, because if your resume gets through and a hiring manager sees your resume because you kind of flooded your resume with hidden keywords, you're not more likely to get interviewed because of that. So really use the tools that like Sarah and I have talked about to actually put those words in your resume visibly. Like don't hide them with funny fonts so that the applicant tracking system sees them, but maybe the hiring manager wouldn't see them right away, because they'll discover that and you're not more likely to get interviewed because of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you know, I would just say, you know, these are the types of questions, say, if you read that on Google about white lining, these are the types of questions you can bring to the business librarian. You know, these are the questions you can bring to us at PRC and ask someone who has some, you know, deeper knowledge of it and say, you know, hey, I'm applying, but I'm not hearing back from hiring managers. You know, I don't understand. I'm qualified for these positions, you know, and you can be like, because I read about white lining, should I do that? Because I read about this, should I do that? And these, you know, we're resources for you to come to us and say, you know, I'm not getting any traction here. I'm not hearing back. What am I doing? What can I do better? So, you know, we just want to remind you that the hiring process is still human. Behind that applicant tracking system that you put all your great information is, someone's going to be reading that. So we just want to make sure that your resume is being read by a human person and not being filtered out by a robot. You know, another thing to think about is, you know, what we call networking. Now, personally, I think networking is a really hard word, because it's like, it conjures up, you know, going to some event and like holding a drink and like trying to meet people. But basically, one of the best tools you can use for job searching is being referred into that position. So, a lot of times you're applying for a position and it'll actually say, one of the questions will actually be, were you referred by anyone for this position? So we just sort of want to remind you that is a great way to sort of increase your chances of getting an interview with a hiring manager, is that if you know someone or can say that someone referred you into a position.
It's also a good way to help kind of get around an applicant tracking system. If you have been referred, a hiring manager is going to look at your resume. And so that can be a really helpful way to get connected with a job that you want.
Yeah. Do you want to take over, Nicole?
No, I think this is still you.
Okay. All right. So just sort of summarizing some of the things in sort of a fun little quiz is we wanted to give you a chance to look at these questions and put some of the knowledge that we shared to work. For instance, the first question is, which heading will get your resume through the ATS? So we gave you 3 different resumes. So you can take a look at that and think, which, maybe even write down A, B, or C. Number 2 question is, how many companies use ATSs to scan and filter their resume submissions, which is something Nicole talked about earlier. And then 3, best methods to get a job, whether it's on Indeed, walk into a company, or even get a referral. Yep, you can see the answer C is going to get you through because it's in a text-based format and doesn't have either coloring or lines or a photo that is going to not translate very well in the ATS.
But those other resumes, you could still bring them with you. So if you did like a job fair or something like that, you could bring those resumes with you to like hand to somebody, but they're not resumes that will get through a robot, unfortunately.
Right. And then, as we mentioned, most companies use some sort of applicant tracking system to scan or filter resumes. So just, be aware of that companies are using this, and it's important to be aware of how you're formatting the resume when you apply. And best methods, not that Indeed isn't great or anything like that, but definitely if you can get a referral from a company employee, that is something you want to leverage. Okay, another little quiz. Best font to use, as well as if you're sending your resume to employers, like through an email, should you use PDF or Word? That's number 5. And then number 6, should you use headers and footers on your resume? Yep, so Arial is a great font. It's something that will be get through and be easily scanned. Resume, as we mentioned, if you are emailing someone directly, it's best to put your resume in a PDF format. But if you're going through an ATS system, it's best to do like a text version of that resume. And then, yeah, you shouldn't use headers or footers just because employers aren't going to see them. And any kind of information out there that says you should put, keywords or something in your header and footer actually just isn't true. All right. And then final thing, just continue with this fun little quiz. Number 7, ATS reads Word, MS Word, and Word. Number 8, career objective is a waste of space. And then 9, dates of employment, which one is correct? So, yep, B, they'll read all types of words, word formatting. And then career objective is career objective section on a resume is a waste of space. Yeah, I don't know, Nicole, honestly, I kind of say it's not a waste of space, right?
I think it really depends. So I think if you're applying to like probably legacy institutions that have maybe an older or more traditional culture, that's probably going to be helpful depending on what is valuable to them. If you're applying to kind of smaller or like younger companies, it's probably not important to them.
Huh. Yeah, and I
What
think,
do you agree with that, Sarah?
you know what? I don't know. Here's what I would definitely agree with is that if you're submitting your resume to a lot of positions that you should be qualified for and you're not hearing back, then like that should be what you should be thinking about. Whether maybe you should be using a career objective, maybe you shouldn't. I would say that's when it's time to come to the business librarian or maybe work with PRC to figure out like why it's not getting through. Like, does your resume need a career objective or not? So I don't know if I disagree or agree. I just think whatever works probably for that person best.
Yeah.
And again, we suggest formatting your dates as it is in the answer A to get through an ATS.
And just a reminder, like we've been talking about our job assistance program. And as we mentioned, we've got kind of one-on-one job coaching, individualized mentoring, and we go over kind of a variety of things from applications to skills and abilities. If you're interested in connecting with us, our website is peoplesrc.org. And so does anybody have any kind of final questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.